Welcome back to the upper room, and we'll be looking at Nehemiah 5 and 6 today. And the good news is that I stumbled on something far more interesting than I thought I ever would. So praise God. Thank you, Holy Spirit. If it is in fact what I think it is, pretty cool. A lot of depth. So we'll just hop right into it. We have Nehemiah 5 here. There was a great cry of the people and of their wives against their brethren, the Jews. For there were that said, We, our sons and our daughters, are many. Therefore we take up corn for them, that we may eat and live. So people are starting to go hungry. The sons and daughters of a really populous people, they need food. Some also there were that said, We have mortgaged our lands, vineyards, and houses, that we might buy corn because of the dearth. There were also that said, We have borrowed money for the king's tribute, and that upon our lands in vineyards. So they don't have the money for food, and they don't even have the money for the taxes that they need to pay. So they're putting up all of their property as collateral so that they may live. They're heavily burdened with this. So in verse 5, we see, Yet now our flesh is as the flesh of our brethren, our children as their children. And lo, we bring into bondage our sons and our daughters to be servants. And some of our daughters are brought unto bondage already. Neither is it in our power to redeem them. For other men have our lands and vineyards. And I was very angry when I heard their cry and these words. That's Nehemiah speaking. Then I consulted with myself, and I rebuked the nobles and the rulers, and said unto them, Ye exact usury, every one of his brother. Usury being the loaning out of money, particularly at interest. Right, so a lot of what we see in banking practice today, and that this sort of outrage stems back from Deuteronomy 23, verse 19. It says, Thou shalt not lend upon usury to your brother, usury of money, usury of victuals, usury of anything that is lent upon usury. Unto a stranger thou mayest lend upon usury, but unto thy brother thou shalt not lend upon usury, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all that thou settest thine hand to, in the land whither thou goest to possess it. So this idea that the the entire population is just pressed for everything that they have. They don't have money to eat. They don't have money to even pay taxes, and their own brothers are lending them money at interest and seemingly putting property up as collateral. And Nehemiah greatly disturbed by this. And I want to point to the first thing that I noticed was this statement here in verse 2. It says, Therefore we take up corn for them, that we may eat and live. And immediately in my mind, I remember back to Genesis, and all I heard was the only thing that was missing from this was live and not die. And so I took a peek back at Genesis 42 to find that pattern. And it says effectively the same thing. Now, when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, right, we have even the same grain, corn, we take up corn from them. Jacob said unto his sons, Why do ye look one upon another? He said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get ye down thither and buy for us from thence, that we may live, right, the same words, that we may eat and live. Only here, that we may live and not die. And so that kind of pressed me to take a deeper peek into what's going on here. And we have um, Jacob and his sons living in the promised land, and Joseph as yet living down in Egypt, and he has naturally ascended into high stature. He is effectively ruler over Egypt just under Pharaoh, and he has stored up grain. So he's sending his brothers down there to get grain. But importantly, after the brothers have gone down the first time and come back, they know that they cannot go back again unless they have Benjamin with them. So that's what you see in Genesis 43. Judah said unto Israel his father, send the lad with me, that is Benjamin, because he knows that's Joseph has commanded that if you come back, you must have Benjamin in your hand or you get nothing. He says, and we will rise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. And further, he says, I will be surety for him. Of my hand shalt thou require him. If I bring him not unto thee and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. And the men took that present, and they took double money in their hand and Benjamin. So they eventually do take Benjamin down with them. And so we'll actually see this pattern a couple of times. What's the best way to do it? We'll just go to Genesis 25 and point out a similar kind of thing. Times when this happens. A trade is made motivated by the fear of death, right? So this whole idea of that we may live, that we may live and not die. We're going to see this again in Genesis 25, where Jacob, I can't say steals the birthright of Esau, but Esau willingly gives it up. Feels kind of nasty though. Jacob sawed pottage. Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom. And Jacob said, sell me this day thy birthright. And Esau said, behold, I am at the point to die. And what profit shall this birthright do to me? Right? So you see a sort of coercion from the place of death or necessity. He's like, I'm going to die. So if I have to trade this in order to sustain my life, what else can I do, right? And which is the same kind of motivation we're seeing uh, with Jacob here. He's like, I have to send my youngest son, the son after my own heart. Well, if I'm going to die, if all my family are going to die, what choice do I have? Same kind of thing with everyone here in Nehemiah. Man, all we got left is our property, but we need money, so we'll give it up. And that this same kind of idea is present in Genesis 38 with Judah and Tamar, but I can't figure out where this pattern is at, because part of this pattern plays out between Genesis 25 and 38, where you can even see it in the language, right? So take a close look at this. Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee. Judah turns to Tamar by the way and said, go to, I pray thee, right? Let me come into thee. So this fear of death, is it that he's afraid? I mean, no. On its face, I kind of see it like this, that Judah is acting according to the lust of his flesh. Is there an underlying fear of death? And by death, I would mean the end of his seed. I wonder at that because if we remember rightly, Judah marries a Canaanite woman, and he has three sons by this woman, Onan, and Shelah. And then and Onan, they die. It leaves Shelah left, and he doesn't even allow for him to get married by the same woman, Tamar, lest he die as well. And so a fear there, definitely. Like, I don't want my son Shelah to die. So maybe that's where that's found in there. But you can see the same thing in almost all cases that something is, let's see, something is desired at the point of death, and so a trade happens, and collateral is given in a couple of the cases. I can't find that collateral in the birthright. So basically, Jacob says, "Sell me your birthright." Esau says, "I'm about to die." Okay. But what you have that shows up in Judah and Tamar is this, that he says, "Go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee." What does she say? "What will you give me?" Right? Almost in the same way as this happens. Esau says, "Give me some of your stew." And Jacob doesn't ask, though. He says, "What'll you give me for it?" He says, "Give me your birthright." And then he does. So instead of Tamar saying, "Give me something," she asks, "What will you give me?" He says, "I'll send you a kid from the flock." But he doesn't give it to her right away. He says, "I will send it later." And she says, "What will you give me as a pledge?" In other words, what collateral? What are you going to leave with me as collateral in the event that you don't send it? He says, "What pledge shall I give?" She says, "Your signet, bracelets, and thy staff." And so what I see there is just implements of his identity and authority. And he does give it to her as collateral until he sends the kid from the flock. And he gave it and came in unto her, and she conceived by him. And interestingly, once I see this idea of collateralization, I see the same thing in the story of Genesis 42 when Jacob sends his sons into Egypt. Jacob and his sons want grain. Pharaoh says, "Give me the youngest son." And they do, but Jacob wants him back, so who goes in as collateral? Judah. Because he says, "I will be surety for him. Of my hand shalt thou require him. If I bring him not unto thee and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever." And interestingly, that this seems to be like a form of justice pointed at Jacob. Because this whole idea, and I could be wrong here, but I remember reading this the first time and being like, "That's pretty mean, dude. Like, your brother is dying, and you're gonna take his birthright from him by some sort of sleight of hand coercion. Like, that's kind of nasty, man." And then what happens is the same action is poured right on top of his head when he finds himself hungry. And Joseph says, "No, you're going to be forced not to give up your birthright, but your youngest son. You need to give him to me." And so it's a kind of justice, which is wild. And that beyond that, we can see the same sort of idea here, where I can't quite pin down like what's collateralized, right? So I guess they trade their property. It's collateralized by what? Or else their property is collateral for the money that they get. And that what I can see there, perhaps, and I would love to hear your comments on this. I bet if I chewed on it longer, I'd probably pin it down real tight. But it seems like it brings into greater focus the spiritual dynamic that's taking place with Jesus. Like especially the fact that when you look at the story of Benjamin, for example, who does Jacob have to trade? Benjamin. What does that mean? Benjamin literally means in Hebrew son of his right hand. So he has to give the son of his right hand. That sure sounds a lot like Jesus. But in the event that he does not come back, Benjamin, Judah will be collateral for Benjamin. And so, in the same way, we can see God sending the son of his right hand, Jesus Christ. And that further, after he goes, just like when Benjamin goes to Egypt, that he has a promise to come back. But for collateral, perhaps this is what I'm thinking. The Holy Spirit is our collateral, our assurance, our surety that he is coming again. Pretty cool. I think that's awesome. I don't know if it's exactly right, but you'll just have to let me know if that's spot on. And further that you have this idea of trades, the birthright, the goat collateralized by Judah's implements, Benjamin collateralized by Judah, and this, kind of muddy property collateralized kind of thing going on in Nehemiah 5. But there's also a theme about surrendering value. But more importantly, I think this has something to do with surrendering spiritual or eternal value, and we see that in the birthright. It's a birthright is something spiritual in nature. It's an agreement. It's a covenant. The son of a right hand, right? I'm thinking eternal property, estate, you know, and for what? For earthly lusts, for things that are dying, hunger. And, and then in the case of Judah, intimacy. And what's the root of these things is fear. If I can't get my food, I'm afraid of dying. If perhaps in Judah's case, I'm not for sure if it's the case, but like if he is in fact afraid that his line will be sort of snuffed out, um, because his other sons have died, um, that there's a fear driving his actions. And so powerful themes. What we trade daily, maybe for our physical lusts and appetites. What do we give up in spiritual capital? You know, big idea. And then just noting here that in Deuteronomy, when he's speaking to lending practices amongst brothers, it says, when thou shalt vow a vow unto the Lord thy God, thou shalt not slack to pay it. For the Lord thy God will surely require it of thee, and it would be sin in thee. That which is gone out of thy lips, thou shalt keep and perform, even a freewill offering, according as thou hast vowed unto the Lord thy God, which thou hast promised with thy mouth. And we see a similar dynamic. These are back to back. Like, hey, don't lend to your brothers. And then when you vow, don't slack to pay it. Well, here's some lending in usury to brothers. And then what does Nehemiah command in verse 12? Then said they, uh, well, I have to go back, I think. I set a great assembly against them. I said unto them, we after our ability have redeemed our brethren the Jews, which were sold unto the heathen. And will you even sell your brethren? Or shall they be sold unto us? They held their peace. They found nothing to answer. Also I said, it is not good that ye do. Ought you not to walk in the fear of our God because of the reproach of the heathen, our enemies? I likewise, and my brethren and my servants, might exact of them money and corn. I pray you, let us leave off this usury. Restore, I pray you, to them, even this day, their lands, their vineyards, their olive yards, and their houses. So a sort of jubilee. Restore unto them also the 100th part of the money that you exact of them. Then they said, we will restore them, and will require nothing of them. So will we do as thou sayest. Then I called the priests, and there it is, took an oath of them. This whole idea of a vow. When you take a vow, you shall not slack to pay it. He calls the priests and takes an oath of them that they should do according to this promise. And it turns out that the people did do according to this promise, but not before Nehemiah says, I shook my lap. And you'll see this in some other translations. Uh, I, I shook the fold of my garment, something like that, and said, so God shake out every man from his house and from his labor that performeth not this promise. Even thus be he shaken out and emptied. And all the congregation said, Amen. The only time, I'm just making the link, I'm not quite sure how to draw a whole bunch of meaning out of the pith of what's happening here, but you see the same thing from Paul in Acts 18. Paul departs from Athens, came to Corinth, and found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus. Because he was of the same craft, he abode with them and wrought, for by their occupation they were tent makers. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and persuaded the Jews and Greeks. And when Silas and Timotheus were come from Macedonia, Paul was pressed in the Spirit and testified to the Jews that Jesus was Christ. And when they opposed themselves and blasphemed, he shook his raiment, right? Shook his raiment, shook my lap, but in some translation, fold of his garment, and said unto them, your blood be upon your own heads. I'm clean. From henceforth I will go unto the Gentiles. So perhaps this idea that you'll make a vow with me, and whatever you decide to do from here on out, it's upon your heads. Like, understand this. If you do not carry this out, this will be to the displeasure of the Lord. So same kind of action that Nehemiah takes here that Paul takes, similar type of action. And beyond that, just noting that we've come off of Nehemiah 1 through 4, took a look at all of the 36 individuals that are names, the 10 groups of people that contribute to rebuilding the wall, and that among them are 7 rulers. These 2 rulers of Jerusalem, of Keilah, Mitzvah, and Beth Hakerem. And so there are 7 in total, and they contributed to the building of this wall. Yet they were among the ones who were extracting usury from their brothers, because it says, then I consulted with myself, and I rebuked who? The nobles and the rulers. The rulers. And said unto them, ye exact usury, every one of his brother. And the nobles, it says too, and it's hard to know exactly who he means there, but the Tekoites are mentioned once as being among nobles, not all of them entirely. What actually says, what color is that? Tekoites. Next unto them the Tekoites repaired, but their nobles, right? So not all of them are nobles, but their nobles put not their necks to the work of the Lord, which is pretty curious. I don't know what that means or why it would be significant, but there's probably something to it. Other Tekoites, I'm thinking the wise woman of Tekoa. I don't know. And I don't know, something catches my attention about that. The rulers, 7, It's a big number. Of a broken down place in rebellion, that was in rebellion, seeking to be built back up, and heavy usury being exacted upon them, even from the rulers from within. Hmm. I don't know. It also had me thinking like sons of God type stuff, who, and by sons of God, I mean like divine council type theology. So I don't know if it's like perfect or even halfway right, but that they are somewhere in Deuteronomy given authority over land, right? In the same way that these rulers have authority. And I don't know. Comment if you got anything on it. And then lastly, in Nehemiah 6, we see those same three individuals, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, these opponents to the building of the wall, who married into the tribe of Levi and Judah in order to exert some kind of sway on the storerooms, the economy of the place. That they saw that the wall was built up and they were not happy, so they were conspiring against Nehemiah. It says in verse 5, then sent Sanballat his servant unto me for 5 times. Okay, 5 times he sent a similar kind of message with an open letter in his hand, wherein was written, it is reported among the heathen, and Gashmu saith it, that you and the Jews think to rebel, for which cause you build the wall, that thou may be their king, according to these words. And whether or not this is directly relevant, it's just something that came to mind. It was just this number 5. So the two threads weaving together being 5 and rebellion that we see over here. The Jews think to rebel, because in Amos 4, this is effectively an excerpt about how Israel does not accept correction. Why are they receiving correction? For their rebellion. And how many times is it said that they have not returned unto the Lord in their correction? Exactly 5 times. Right? So he talks about all these afflictions. I've given you cleanness of teeth in all your cities, and want of bread in all your places. So an affliction of hunger, yet you have not returned to me. Also I have withholden the rain from you, so drought during the harvest, and I caused it to rain upon the city, and caused it not to rain upon another city. One piece was rained upon, and the piece whereupon it not rained not withered. So 2 or 3 cities wandered unto one city to drink water, but they were not satisfied. Yet you have not returned to the Lord. And this goes on. Yet you have not returned. Yet you have not returned. In your rebellion you have not returned. What does he say terrifyingly? Verse 12, therefore thus will I do unto thee, O Israel, and because I will do this unto thee, prepare to meet thy God, O Israel. That ain't a little terrifying? I don't know what it is. And so you have this accusation. The Jews think to rebel, and I think it seems significant to me because it seems a very apt tactic of the enemy to use your past, your personal past, not even just Judah's past or Israel's past, and say, hey, you know what we think? We think you're trying to rebel because look what you've done, right? And 5 times he sends these letters in order to accuse. But I think Nehemiah is a really phenomenal example of just standing and walking in faith and strength. And here we see him saying, now therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. And he resists, and he's able to sort of foil their plot. So really amazing stuff. So yeah, that's what I got on Nehemiah 5 and 6. That it turned out way more interesting than I thought it would. So that was really cool. If you got any ideas or uh, sort of relevant threads, feel free to comment below. If you like this type of stuff, just like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, this is the Upper Room. Thanks, guys.